Great. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's GoRail webinar on navigating the USDOT grant process. We're very fortunate to have with us today two folks from the Association of American Railroads, Melissa Connolly, who is Assistant Vice President of Government Affairs, and Bill Thompson, who is Chief Engineer. They'll be each presenting separately. Melissa will go first, but first I just want to say thank you for joining us. Many of you have been involved with GoRail over the years, and you've helped us out when we've called upon you to help get the word to Congress about the importance of a strong and thriving freight rail industry in your states and communities. And we view this as a great opportunity to try and give back a bit. So I hope that the material presented today is of value to you. I want to let you know that if you have questions, you should type them into the chat box and they'll be addressed at the end. Additionally, this webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be made available on gorail.org in our grant hub, which I'm sure most, if not all of you, have visited already. With that, I'm going to turn off my screen and turn it over to Melissa. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you so much, Russ. And as Russ said, I am Melissa Connolly. I'm the Assistant Vice President of Government Affairs for the Association of American Railroads. And prior to joining AAR back in January, I worked on the House side of Congress for the last 13 years. So I was in Congress when we passed IIJA, when we created this program, and I'm very happy to be on the implementation side now and seeing it actually come to fruition. So I wanted to talk quickly through the Grade Crossing Elimination Program and highlight a few things within the statute that relate to the application process, and then talk a little bit also about what's not in statute, but may impact the process nonetheless. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So the Grade Crossing Elimination Program is a competitive grant program. The IIJA authorized $2.5 billion and appropriated $3 billion over 5 years for this program. And in FY22, we are looking at about $600 million in available funding for FY22. When the NOFO comes out, which we expect to happen in a couple of weeks. So the eligible projects under this funding program are a grade separation or closure. Obviously, that's pretty self-evident in the name. Also, track relocation, improvement or installation of safety equipment, other crossing safety projects, and then groups of related projects within that list. There's also funding available for planning and design, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Eligible applicants for this program are essentially public entities, so any state, local, or tribal government that includes cities, counties, port authorities, metropolitan planning organizations, or any combination of those eligible entities as well. One of the sort of unique things about this program is that railroad approval is required before proceeding to construction. So coordination with the railroads that are going to be impacted by closing this crossing is absolutely essential and instrumental to a successful application. So every railroad has a government affairs person in the state that you or your colleagues can connect with. They also have a public project engineer in the state. And so if you haven't already, it's incredibly important to reach out to and start building those relationships and discussing these projects now. And then finally, there is a non-federal match required for this program as well, of at least 20%. And that match can come from many different sources. It can be money from private sources, from state, local, or county sources. And it explicitly says that applicants can count the costs incurred for preliminary engineering in their non-federal match for this program. So that's sort of the overall statute of what's included in here. But there's a few provisions that I wanted to highlight from the statute that are really important for the application process. So the first is that no more than 20% of the funding in any given year can go to one state. So that means it will be very important to coordinate with state partners when applying. You don't want to lose out on funding because, the state applied for different projects elsewhere and DOT picked one over the other. So that's something to just keep in mind as you're thinking through this process. There's also at least a 20% set aside for rural or tribal areas. So rural essentially means not urban in this context. It's sort of hard to define something as a negative of something else, but you can look at the Census Bureau for more information on what is considered rural and urban. And note that this says at least 20%. There's nothing saying that DOT can't go above 20%. In the round of CRISI applications that we just saw come out, it was closer to 25% it was closer to 50% for rural, for grants in rural areas. And then there's also a 0.25% set aside of funding for safety, information, and education programs. But the one I really wanted to highlight is this at least 3% of funding has to be for planning grants. I think that's a really compelling set aside within this program, and it really opens this program up a lot. For a brand new program that people may not have been prepared for as they were thinking through their transportation projects, 5-10 years down the line. If you weren't thinking about grade separations and closing these crossings, then you might not be ready at this point to apply for these larger grants. But you could apply for a funding or a planning grant as a great way to start. And while the grant program itself has a $1 million floor for what these projects will be awarded, that doesn't apply to these funding or planning grants. So you could seek, a couple $100,000 to start this process, to do to identify where the problem crossings in your area are, to do environmental reviews, to start any level of that process. Start with this planning money, and then maybe 1 year or 2 years down the line, you might be ready to apply for the construction funding and for the larger grants that come from that. And again, you could start with this planning money here and then apply for a CRISI grant next year, or a crossing grant the following year. So there's several ways that you can get into this program and start this process, even if you're not quite ready at the construction point yet. So the next slide will walk through sort of what the statute says about how DOT will evaluate these applications. So on the left there, you can see the primary evaluation. DOT is looking for projects that improve safety, that grade separate, eliminate, or close crossings, improve mobility, reduce emissions, and provide community benefits. Interestingly, they note noise reduction as one of the community benefits here. Also improving access for emergency services, providing economic benefits to the community, and improving access to communities separated by rail crossings. So we expect all of these primary evaluation points to be identified in the NOFO, and you will have to specifically demonstrate using evidence how your project meets each of these evaluation points. The statute also lays out additional considerations that DOT should look at, including innovation. Does the project use innovative technology, innovative design and construction, innovative construction materials, use of contracting initiatives to use local labor, improving mobility for multiple modes of transportation. So they include in there, entrance and exit from freight facilities, non-vehicular transportation like bikes, pedestrians. Is this project part of the state planning? Is it included on the freight investment portion of the state freight plan, the state rail plan, the state highway rail crossing action plan? And then what level of financial support is coming from the rail carriers for this project? So these are other things that DOT will be looking at as they're going through the applications. And again, the more you can demonstrate that your project meets these considerations, the better the chance you have to be funded at the end. And then the last piece I wanted to talk through is something that's not in the statute. It's on the next slide here. Yep. And this is sort of the administration and secretarial objectives. And these are sort of some of the greater themes that the White House and the Secretary of Transportation, Secretary Buttigieg, have been talking about when they talk about IIJA. And we see these themes and these ideas come around, every time that NOFOs are released or that, awards are announced. They're not necessarily in statute, but this is sort of the softer message that the White House, this administration sees for IIJA. These might sound very familiar to you. Things like addressing climate change, improving sustainability and resiliency, improving equity and community connections, especially in historically underserved communities, improving safety and efficiency, and creating good jobs and economic opportunities. So these might seem sort of very broad, but the good news is that the Rail Crossing Elimination Program has a great story to tell that really fits these objectives and preferences. You can talk about reducing emissions from idling, encouraging a modal shift to trains to improve sustainability by improving the flow of traffic, improving safety by not having cars near the crossings, or by allowing emergency services to move through. On equity, you can look at the neighborhoods you're connecting, or the ability to improve small business in the communities. I'm sure Bill is going to talk about that a lot with what they've been doing in Chicago. And if you have questions about equity and about any of these sort of broader environmental justice and racial justice issues, DOT has a lot of information on their website about how to address equity in some of these grant programs. And then on the economic factors, there's a lot of ways to think about this. You can think about this more broadly, like supply chain fluidity, not having these trains stopping at crossings, or more locally, like creating jobs in the area, improving foot traffic around the businesses in the area. So there's ways to sort of find these themes that the White House is talking about and thinking about, that the Secretary of Transportation is talking about and thinking about, and incorporate them into your project application and really sort of sell your project to the administration in their terms. So now I'll turn it over to Bill Thompson, who has more experience than anyone I know with DOT grant applications, and he can talk a little bit about his experiences. But I would also say, if you have any questions about that process, please don't hesitate to reach out to AAR or to GoRail. We are happy to help and happy to be of service. So thanks so much.
Okay, thanks, Russ. Thanks, Melissa. Does the screen look okay here, Melissa?
Looks good, Bill.
All right, great. So, well, good afternoon, everybody. I see that we have quite a variety of attendees here from local communities and counties, consultants, various agencies, and so cities all around the country. And welcome. And hopefully this will help you a little bit in terms of developing a plan with regard to the Railroad Crossing Elimination Program. And Melissa really summarized programs very well, and I won't go into the detail unless there's questions about that in the future. What I'll do here is discuss a little bit of history of CREATE, just why are we here, and talk a little bit about the partnership, and that's very important, and we know the administration views that as important also, and then talk a little bit about our advocacy effort, the FRA grant process, and then hopefully we'll have some time for some questions. So a long story short here, back in 2000, the Surface Transportation Board basically told the railroads and the city and the state that they needed to fix an issue in Chicago with regard to transportation. And after a huge snowstorm in 1999, basically the CREATE program was formally announced. Prior to that, the operational improvements had started with the development of the Chicago Transportation Coordination Office, and now CROC, which basically is a 24/7 operation that manages and monitors the Chicago terminal. The partnership was created in 2003. It includes the 6 Class 1s that operate in Chicago. The Federal Highway Administration is the federal partner, although since that we've added the Federal Railroad Administration, It includes Amtrak and Metra. It includes the Indiana Harbor Belt and the Belt Railway of Chicago, and of course and I said Amtrak and Metra and the city of Chicago. The Cook County was added several years ago when they saw what we were doing and offered to come online to help us, and after considerable due diligence, basically have made a decision to add some funding to the program, and we're very much appreciate the county's involvement. I'll just say here that we have a phenomenal relationship with all these partners, and that's very important also for the I don't know why my screen disappeared here now. Let's see, let's go back to that. Can you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
I don't know why I'm not able to see it on this end here for some reason. So okay, we're back to it. So we've been very fortunate here in terms of stewardship and federal grants, and we've had quite a bit of experience with federal grants. And one of the bigger ones was the 132 million from the infra program, and you can see here a list of other grants that we've received, several CRISI grants, and more recently an IFRA grant from one of our grade separations. We've received about 1.6 billion in funding total from the program, and you can see how that splits out. So between the partners, the state, the railroads, and the local governments, which is the county and the city, we've have about 1.6 billion. We've spent about $1 billion in cash on the program. We're not very heavy on the top. We basically have a relatively small contingent that's the stakeholders committee made up with representatives from the city, state, the county, and one representative from the railroads, and then the management committee reports to that group. And then we have 3 groups under that, basically the implementation committee, which is really the group that develops the program, the finance committee manages the finance, and advocacy, which really is reaching out to the community, state, city, county governments, et cetera. So we spend a lot of time on implementation, which is the really development of the projects, and then a lot of time and effort on the whole advocacy. In this case, this shows you what we're doing on 75th Street, which is one of our projects. Advocacy is very, very important, and you'll be able to get copies of these slides, but we have an advocacy planning working group, a social media group, and a federal working group. And we have representatives, you can see, from the city, state, the county, and the railroads that support that. We have various documents we've developed to basically explain how the public involvement and the community partnership process works within CREATE. And we documented that so it's very clear in everybody's mind how the process works. We talked about this. We also have an extensive outreach program with local officials, and as time moves on, we also have greater advocacy with the communities in and around the projects. I'm not going to talk about this. We do have what's called a community advisory group that's made up of representatives of the influential representatives in the community that deal with churches, various community groups, some homeowners and residents, people assigned or given the task by the aldermen in the area, commuters, etc. And they meet several times a year to talk through the projects. Just a touch of CREATE. So CREATE consists of 4 corridors. If you look at this map, most of the projects on the blue corridor, which is the Beltline, are complete. We have work underway on the yellow corridor and the red corridor, and quite a bit of construction right now on the red corridor, which is the Western Avenue corridor. And this is an example of one of our projects. This is where 130th and Torrance cross the NICD, Northern Indiana Commuter District, and Norfolk Southern. This crossing with the Norfolk Southern used to be at grade, and you can see we buried it under the Norfolk Southern and put a new NICD bridge over the top. That was completed in 2015. I mentioned the community partnership work. This is very important. as Melissa said earlier, this is very, very important to the administration. And so we make sure that we emphasize in any applications the work that we're doing on projects, and we make sure that we continue that work with all new projects. And that's one of the areas that we've continued to grow and develop with regard to the CREATE program, is how do we properly implement the community partnership work, and what things are we doing to help the communities in and around these projects. The local hiring and workforce development is ongoing, and the education program with the Chicago Public Schools and the local community colleges is also ongoing. And then we have a significant DB participation in the program, and we do regular what we call get on board events to explain to the DB and the minority contractor community what opportunities we're going to have in the future. Just an example of some of the projects. Here's one of the 71st Street grade separations that's now basically starting construction. We've completed, now that's 32 projects. So we basically had the ribbon cutting last week on a 32nd project, and that now reads 32, but you get some idea of where we're at, about 20 projects in various stages of engineering. And I'm going to jump now to another slide here. We'll pull this out. And what I'd like to show you is the so this is the FRA website, and what we're going to do is I'm going to talk through this a little bit. This will be my only time I'm actually going to show the website, but you can go to the Federal Railroad Administration website, and it gives you their webinars. And one of the places to really help in terms of understanding the process is to look under grants and loans and look under some of the presentations. They have slide presentations, and they also have the videos of those webinars that they've held. I find it's very, very helpful, and I would strongly recommend look at that. I'm going to use two of those presentations here in a moment, and we'll go to that right now. And the first one is preparing for a cost-benefit analysis. I'll blow that up. So the only reason I wanted to show you this slide is it's significant in terms of the grade separation improvement program. If you go down here to slide number 5, you'll notice that what's unique about slide number 5 is it talks about the Grade Crossing Elimination Program. And if you see, that's the second bullet at the top here. And what's unique about it is I don't know why that popped up. What's unique about it is that when you do a railroad crossing elimination program, you do not need a benefit cost analysis. Now, we find in the CREATE program that the development of the benefit cost work constitutes about half of the cost of development of that grant application. So it's not necessary that you develop that benefit cost analysis for the Grade Crossing Elimination Program. Now, when the NOFA actually comes out, we'll have a better idea of what all those requirements are. But this is what FRA has told us preliminarily is basically the way they're going to set it up. Now I'm going to go to another presentation. And because the NOFA is not yet out for the Grade Crossing Elimination Program, I think the one that's one of the more recent grant programs and probably reflects closely, other than this requirement for the benefit cost analysis, the process that the USDOT is using. What we're finding as these NOFAs develop and as the work that basically FRA and USDOT continues, they learn from each other, and they tend to tweak and adjust the NOFAs to reflect what lessons learned in the previous NOFAs. And so we know that a lot of what's in the CRISI grant application from 2021 is similar to what you're going to see in the Grade Crossing Elimination Program. So if you go to the website, and you go to the FRA website and you pull up FY21 Consolidated Rail Infrastructure CRISI Grant Program, you go to slide, I'm going to jump down here to slide 13, and Melissa talked about some of the preliminary stuff, but this is a good place. This is a good place to start to develop an understanding of the process now. And you really need to get your process started now. If you're interested in going after a a grant for a grade crossing, you really need to get the team put together, and you really get the process started now. And I can't overemphasize the importance of the teamwork. And I can really, based on our experiences in the CREATE program, what we find helps tremendously is having local support and frankly money in the project at the very beginning of the program. And I think one of the ways to think about the grade crossing program is think about that partnership. Who would you want, or who do you need if you're starting at the grassroots level? You're starting an effort to basically build a grade separation. You certainly have your community, city, town, village, basically willing to put some money into the program, and that's a good start. But you really should go and talk to your county about it, your county transportation department. Are they willing to support the project? Are they willing to put some money into the program? Talk to your state DOT. Are they willing to support the project? Are they willing to put some money in the project? So if you start out, say, with $200,000, and if each of the partners were to put in $200,000, that gets you up to about $600,000 in terms of money. And one of the neat things about the program now, and it didn't exist so much in the past, and that is monies are available for funding planning. And in the past, there wasn't very much money available for planning, particularly grade separations. The local communities would have to come up with most of that funding themselves, or with their state and counties, to basically get that process started. But now, with the way the program is set up, you basically can go after planning monies, which is really exciting, I think. So you get the NOFA, it'll come out, it contains a lot of details. You've got to read through the NOFA, you have to understand it. If you've been through a grant application, you understand how important this is. The key parts of the NOFA are the dates, the eligibility, the contact information, and like I said earlier, regardless of whether it comes to the Secretary's office or FRA or even another agency, they're going to be very, very similar in format. FRA is the one that I'm using here, but it reflects many of the NOFAs that USDOT uses across the entire country. And the eligibility information, the review information, the contacts is all very important. And if you are getting close to basically having an application that you think is already ready, you can go to FRA right now and you can ask their thoughts on your application. In other words, here's what we're thinking of doing. Here's kind of what we've put together in terms of a package. Before the NOFAs come out, NOFA comes out is the best time to ask questions in terms of process and explain to them what you're trying to do. And it's good to do it collectively if you have a team set up with your county and your state agencies. You'll go into the competitive grant. It'll give you a lot of information how to get to the NOFA, and give you the Federal Register references, and then some of the things you can search for the grant opportunity. One of the important things here, if you don't already have this is primarily to the communities, and that is that you need to have a Dun & Bradstreet number for the application, and you need to have, I'm getting some echo here, Russ. And then you need to have a SAMS number, basically access into the federal government's award management system and grants.gov. So it's a good idea, if you don't have that information already established, they need to set that up now. And any agency, a railroad can't do this, an agency can do it. An agency has to be a sponsor. The city, the state, the county, they have to sponsor it. They probably have this already. If a local community wants to be the sponsor and they don't have it, then they have to set it up. So that's one of the things that you need to start getting set up right now. And then the website takes you through the grant application process, does a good job of explaining it. Some of the required documents are the project narrative. That basically describes the project, what it is you're trying to accomplish, why there's benefits from it. The statement of work is very important. The environmental compliance document that you've developed in order to get to that point, and the benefit cost analysis. As I said, it appears you do not have to do a BCA analysis. You certainly don't for the planning side, and you may not for crossing applications, grade separation applications. One of the things that happens is when you if you think about the benefit cost of creating a grade separation, what happens to the risk? The risk of a vehicle running into a train or a train hitting a vehicle, or somebody running around the gates and getting hit, what happens? All of that risk goes to zero. Once that track is built and that train is under or over that roadway, you basically, the risk goes to zero. So the benefit cost analysis is fairly straightforward. And you may have some accident data you should pull into the discussion, but it sounds like you're not going to have to complete that benefit cost analysis. Like I said, the work to model that and to understand that and to basically figure out the BCA is what we found is about half the cost of the application, roughly. And there's a variety of forms that are required that you have to fill out. The grade separation NOFA might have a little variation on this, but you can look at these forms right now to get an idea of some of the information that they're going to be looking for. Scope, schedule, budget, very, very important. And then I'll move down here. I'm going to talk a little bit about the process here. So it goes through an intake and eligibility process. Once you submit your application, it goes into the federal system. They'll check it for eligibility. Do you have all the documents in there? Did you submit all the documents correctly? Then they start their evaluation process. Then they start to farm that out. So in other words, if it comes in through FRA, for example, they may give some of it to USDOT Secretary's office, may give some of it to the Federal Highway Administration review, say on the highway side. Then they'll go through a selection process that involves the administrator and or secretary, and then they make the announcement. But that intake and eligibility, can't overstress how important it is to make sure that once you finish your application, my suggestion is have that done a week in advance of the due date. So basically, you want to schedule yourself once that NOFA hits, and like I said, you should be working on it now if you want to participate in the one that's supposed to be out in June, and there's not too many days left in June. But you need to have that application in a week in advance. I do know that, like the Chrissy application 2021, I don't know how many received, 100 and some applications. There were only like 20 that were submitted prior to the application due date, and that's dangerous. Don't wait till that date. Something's going to fail. Something's not going to work. But by having it in the system, whoever applies basically, and the people that are helping you prepare the application can look over the shoulder, and you can do this like in a Teams meeting or a webinar, and you can watch that information being input. And once that information all gets input into the grants.gov process system, you can then take a look at it, let it set for a day, then go in and look at all the stuff you've submitted. Make sure that each document that you've submitted is complete and basically intact, and the spreadsheets, if there's a spreadsheet in there, it actually works, and make sure all that, let's say there's going to be 10 or 15 documents in there, the narrative plus maybe the 10 or so attachments, make sure all that stuff works. And so then what FRA and USDOT will do, they'll take that and they'll make sure you have all your documents. And then if you don't, then they're not going to review it. If you do have the documents, then they'll review the application, and then they'll go on to the evaluation process. Some of the best practices, and I think there's a lot of good things here are outlined in this presentation that FRA has on their Chrissy site, and that is you talk about again, they're suggesting read the notice of funding opportunity. So people in your organization, if you have a consultant doing this, you need to read that. You need to understand the statement of work and understand the benefit cost analysis. So the narrative includes a cover page, and that's basically dictated by the USDOT, a project summary, funding eligibility, project description, project location, implementation management, and environmental readiness. So those are all things that FRA or USDOT want to see in their applications. I'll just hit these quickly. The cover page is standard. I mean, you literally, if you have a grade separation, you literally could start to fill that out right now. You might not know the total cost to build a project, but you can start working on this right now. You'll have a summary of the project that basically describes the project in less than a dozen sentences, and what the benefits are, and what some of the challenges are you face, and why this is important. Then also the funding. Why is this project eligible? What kind of funding do you have available? What public and private monies are there in there? What relationships do you have? I talked about the GRADE program and the relationship we have with the railroads and the state and the city county. You can talk about the sources of those funds. You've read the NOFA, so you know why your project is eligible. You understand that, and you need to understand that why the applicant's eligible, i.e. you're an agency, the railroads can't apply. Why the project is eligible, it's a grade separation. A detailed project description. Now this is where you really dive into what you need in terms of describing the project, how the project is set up, how it's organized, what do you accomplish. Like in one of our recent CRISI grants, we have 17 bridges that are going to be rehabbed or replaced. We described in about a quarter to a half a page every one of those bridges that are going to be rehabbed. We described the signal work that's going to go into it. We described the track work. Then we get out of a separate piece that described the community partnership work. All the things that are part of the project, and the union outreach that we have ongoing, the local hiring and so forth. Locations, maps help tremendously. We usually have several maps. We basically start out with a high-level map of Chicago showing with a dot where that project is at, and take it down to like a county-sized map with a line showing where the project is at, and then you can take it into the detail level, and then you'll need detailed design drawings. Eventually, you'll need to provide the entire design package. Once you get through the phase 2 design, they'll want to see not only the preliminary design that was used to clear the environmental process, but also they'll want to see the actual detailed design documents that are going to go to the contractor and the bid documents. So they want to see that information, and that does not. There's usually a limit in terms of pages. This does not mean all this goes into the narrative. What we do is we provide a link on our website to these documents. Like, for example, one of the projects has well over 200 pages of documents. So if you want to go look at the detail on how a specific structure is going to be constructed, you go to that link and then you go to that particular bridge, and we provide links as in the location and in the description on how to get to that information. Keep in mind the evaluation and the selection criteria. Melissa mentioned some of this, Russ mentioned some of this. So like I said, one of the things that's changing in the program is there's much more attention to the whole equity issue and communities in and around the project. And we know clearly that we've had to step up in the CREATE program, step up that game and do a better job. It's the right thing to do, but we know that by making sure we are cognizant of that and we describe what we're doing with the local community clearly in that grant application, that helps us. And you are committing to doing a lot of work outside of just designing the project. In other words, your government affairs people or your community people, basically the people that deal with the communities in and around that project at the city level, possibly at the county level, if the county is sponsoring the application, they need to understand that community and the neighborhood and basically what things they find important. And that also becomes an important point in the evaluation that USDOT will look at. They want to know a lot about how you're going to implement and manage the project. What do you have set up? Who has the experience to manage a project like this? So we find that in terms of grade separation costs, that projects range in a rural setting. You can have projects that are out in fairly open field over basically a single or double track main line, maybe put a 2 to 4 lane highway over the top. You can be in the under $50 million range. You move that into a urban environment, it's going to be in excess of $50 million. Our grade separation projects in Chicago range from about $40 million to $170 million. So there's a big range in what these projects cost, and you need to understand how you're going to implement that project. Who's going to be responsible? Who's the champion of the project that's going to submit the application? Then who's actually going to be responsible to basically implement that project? And how are you going to do that? How are you going to manage it? Are you going to is the county going to manage it with their engineering forces? Are you going to bring a consultant in to do the design, and then you bid it and you bring somebody in to do some oversight, some CM work as an extension of your agency? How do you do that? And where does the railroad fit into this? How are they going to manage their portion of it? Do you have to do significant track shifts in order? If not, let's say the only way to do this is to move the railroad or put a temporary route in for the railroad, and that causes big issues to start with, because now you have to slow down the operation. You have to basically take a lot of safety issues into consideration, versus going over the top of the railroad. It's much easier to basically implement the program, and the railroads can do it with much less oversight, but both work. And we have projects in Chicago that are done both ways. You can go over or under. How are you going to manage that? And then last of all, where are you at with regard to NEPA? And have you gone through a phase one? And this is oftentimes there's oftentimes state regulations that basically drive this with hooks into the NEPA process. In our case, we have some specific requirements that were developed by the Illinois Department of Transportation just for the CREATE program to help us through the environmental readiness piece. We have separate environmental documents for each of the 70 projects. There was talk early on, this is before my time in the program, of having one environmental package for the whole program of projects. We didn't. We went to single projects, and some of them were very simple. The projects, the CREATE program projects, range from a couple $1 million to several $100 million per project. And those very smaller projects, simpler ones, much easier to do the environmental documentation on it and get that approved. Again, here's a place where your federal agency, particularly Federal Highway Administration, in case of a grade separation, they can provide you guidance. The city and the state probably has people that can help you provide guidance with regard to the environmental process. And oftentimes the county may have experience through their own projects with the environmental process. Basic statement of work, very, very important. You can look at some examples of this and what's included in the statement of work. This does need a lot of attention and how the project is basically going to be constructed. There's some certain basic things that USDOT would like to see in the statement of work, and you can look those up. And I think when the NOFA comes out, it'll give you additional guidance on what they're thinking of. Background, objection, project location, description of work, etc. All pretty basic project stuff that either your engineering departments or a consultant you hire should be able to develop that, and it's a pretty standard model. Scope, schedule, budget, very, very basics. What does the project consist of? What is your schedule? When are you going to finish the phase one if you're asking for planning money? And even if you're asking for just planning money, when are you going to finish the design? And when do you expect to start construction? When do you finish construction? What do you expect it to cost right now? What are your estimates for the program? And what percentages of the build is going to be the phase one, basically the basic design and the environmental, or the phase two? This is an IDOT vernacular, which is the detailed design. So at IDOT, basically phase one is enough of the footprint to establish the location of the project so we complete the environmental. Then once that's approved, we go to the phase two. And the phase two basically is all the detailed drawings on the project, everything right down to the size of rebar, the spacing of rebar. And we have not used design build on any of our project. Everything here is pretty much design bid build, pretty conventional construction. I talked about the BCA. It doesn't sound like it's going to be required. You may require it though, as you pick up on some of what Melissa said earlier. If you go forward and you basically complete an application that basically maybe is not funded, but then you reapply for, say, Chrissy may require you to do a BCA on the project. So keep that in mind as you're working on this. It's a good idea to have a fairly good understanding of the BCA, and even if it's not required, I would keep that in mind, as you may, if you're not successful with the grade separation application, you may have to do it for another application in the future. But it also gives you a way internally to kind of prioritize projects. If you have several grade separations, you're thinking about it, just looking at that those 2 or 3 grade separations right now in terms of understanding at a high level of the benefits and the costs on how to build those might help you in terms of prioritizing which of those grade separations you want to go after. If you have several in mind, you could start on that now. Base case is important. What's the status quo? And then what happens when you build the project? What happens if you don't build the project? And then what's the timeline? And how are those benefits achieved once that project is developed? That's pretty much the basics for a BCA. And then you'll need to know the cost. You'll need to have some idea of project costs, and as I said, benefits. And then there's a concern with residual value at the end of the project. One of the big things that we find the USDOT and FRA asks us about, and we always put in the application, is that we will maintain these projects for a very long time. They worry that you'll invest money, they'll invest money in one of your projects, and then 5 years from now you'll stop maintaining it, and you won't be able to maintain it until such time the thing falls apart, or you basically get money from somebody else in order to maintain it. But they want a commitment up front that you're going to maintain and operate that facility for a long time into the future. And one thing about a railroad project, if the railroads are involved in that, the railroad end of it, once you get involved in it, the railroads will commit to maintaining their portion of the project, the portion that was built by the railroads, basically for a very, very long time. It's never been a problem here in the 15 years I've been involved in having an issue. Some things that improve the benefits: removable slow orders and wait times and delays and that sort of thing. Modal diversion is another thing commonly used in BCAs. And just a little bit of a recap, you'll talk about the as you look at the NOFA, and I'm sure what's going to happen is USDOT will put out the NOFA, and then they will immediately start to offer training sessions on the grant application process. So if you're serious, if you want to get involved, you can start working on it now. You should start working on it now, or you should have started working on it. That's even a better scenario. But it's very, very important what Melissa mentioned earlier, and that is that on the railroad side, I know there are a couple of railroad representatives on the phone here today. First of all, if you're a community, you know who that government affairs representative is for that railroad where that grade crossing, or maybe it's multiple railroads where that grade separation is going to be built. You know who that government affairs person or people are. You need to talk to that person and tell them what you're thinking. And then it doesn't hurt, as Melissa also said, they have different names in different parts of the country, but all the railroads have public project engineers assigned to support public projects around the country. Short lines may be they may be pressed to have this support through their engineering department. Maybe a little harder for them to provide people on a immediate basis, but they'll basically participate with you in the development of the plans for that. They want to be involved in it. They want to be engaged in it. And by having them in up front, excuse me, it provides you standards and information that aren't going to be taken exception to by any of the agencies or by the railroad as the time goes on. We talked about the environmental piece here a little bit. So you want to make sure that you're compliant with the state's environmental requirements and NEPA requirements, noise and vibration, impact on neighborhoods, etc. Again, you can find more information about that at the USDOT's website. So let me pull down from that, and I think that gives us about 10 minutes or so, Melissa, and maybe we have time for a few questions, or if we have anything come in on the chat.
That'd be great. Thank you both very much. That was a ton of useful information. I unfortunately can't see the questions coming up on my screen, but luckily we have GoRail Assistant Vice President of Communications, Betsy Cantwell, to help us out.
Thanks, Russ. It looks like right now we just have one question, so go ahead and type those if you have them. It's a good one though. So if you have invested in planning for a project, can those expenses be applied toward the 20% match?
So if those have been investments that you've made as a community or an agency that have not involved federal funds, usually it's pretty straightforward to basically claim that match. But if there was any federal money involved in that, the likelihood of that is no. You basically cut it off. Our experience has been, you cut it off at the start of say that was part of the phase 1 money, the environmental money, and then you start with the phase 2, then you can basically come up with essentially new match to go forward.
And the statute also says, explicitly says that applicants can count costs incurred from preliminary engineering in their non-federal match. But again, as Bill is correct, that if there's federal money in it, if federal money was used to pay for that, then most likely not, no.
Okay, I'm gonna launch a poll and give people a chance to type in a couple more questions. The poll is just asking if you are interested in pursuing a grade crossing project in your community, yes or no. I think is everyone seeing it right now?
I am on my screen, Betsy.
Okay. So just quick read the room. I'll leave it up for a few more seconds. Okay, in the meantime, looks like we got another one. Is it possible that some of the funds be made available for advertising, i.e. radio and TV ads?
So
Interesting question. Yeah.
I'm not sure. There is, as I said, that 0.25% of funding for safety education projects. So it could be something that could fit into that funding pool, but that's something we'd have to look into and try to get you a firm answer on that.
Oh, and it looks like this was from an Operation Lifesaver. So that would apply there, it seems like.
Yeah, so we'll look into that and see if I can get a firmer answer on that question.
So the way that we approach kind of that issue is that you want to get and you need to gain local community support for your project. And basically you develop a relationship. There's probably already communications people within your agency that have a relationship with your local media, within your local newspapers, other web posted information, etc. By developing a relationship with them as the project builds, you basically keep them informed and you offer them opportunities to come out and see the project. You offer them opportunities when you have a groundbreaking or a ribbon cutting to see the project. And that's a way to get to that, to get to the public, is to basically go through that process. And that's just part of your advocacy effort.
I am not seeing any more questions. If you saw from our poll results, it looks like 83% of you are interested in pursuing a grade crossing project. So that's exciting.
Okay, well then what are you doing on the call? Get to work. So, I mean, really, you need to get, I can't say it enough, you need to get started on this right now. USDOT has created tremendous opportunities here for everybody. I looked at the list of communities on here. It's phenomenal. I mean, it's incredible. And I'm sure all of you need grade separations built. You need to get to work on it right now. Start to develop the partnership, start to get some money to basically start your design and your phase one work. Talk to the state, talk to the county, get that started like right now, tomorrow. Set up those meetings to figure this out, figure out how much money, talk to the mayor and your administrator, figure out how much money you can put into that right now and go after it. Because that NOFA is going to be out here very soon, and you want to be able to go after planning and engineering monies. And that's how you're going to have to do it. You're going to have to put some money into it up front and start talking to the railroads, as Melissa said earlier.
We had a few more questions come in. Let's see, is an elevated pedestrian grade crossing an eligible project?
I'd say if it improves if there's a significant safety improvement with it, I would say it would be.
Yes, and highway and pedestrian way grade crossings are both included in this. So if it's a pedestrian way that you're trying to separate, then that would be included as well.
And I'd say if it's an existing path, you have to take a good look at that. In other words, so you already have a safety improvement, you already have a safety benefit. Do you get an additional safety and benefit by replacing it, for example? State of good repair, that sort of thing. If it's over a railroad track, you might be able to develop an understanding where, okay, it's better, it's safer. The railroad's going to expand the number of tracks underneath of it, whatever the case happens to be. There might be ways to determine eligibility.
Great. Let's see. Are there options for funding sidings so that standing trains waiting for traffic to clear aren't cutting communities in half?
That's a question for the railroads.
Yeah.
I would say to that person, you probably know which railroad it is, and I would reach out to your government affairs people. at that particular railroad and discuss this. Now, not to say there's not federal money available for that. I'm not saying that. I just don't know that much about that kind of work.
Let's see. When will the FRA RFP be released?
Do you mean if you mean the NOFOs, we've been told for the last, several months that we're anticipating it being in June. And so it should be any day now. There's not a lot of days left. So it should really be pretty much any day now.
And I'll add a plug for GoRail's newsletter mailing list. We will send out a notification as soon as the NOFO is live, so that you'll find out that way if you're signed up.
With regard to RFPs, that's something that you'll put out as an agency or a supporter of the project in order to bring a consultant on board, and you need to put that out immediately if you want to get help on this next NOFA.
Let's see. Okay, can you describe best practices for creating bundles of projects, and then mainly crossing eliminations in parentheses that may be over multiple host railroads and or multiple communities?
Well, over multiple, well, first of all, I'll start with the last point first, the multiple communities. Just what I said at the beginning, you need all the partners together. So that's perfect. Sit down and have meetings right now with all the communities that are involved. If you have 2 or 3 communities, maybe, I know we have one project that's right on an intersection of 2 communities in the city of Chicago. And so those 3 communities are working together on that particular project. So you need to have those, set up those relationships and develop that relationship now. And then as far as multiple railroads, one railroad or multiple railroads, again, talk to the railroads, understand what their needs are, and they need to understand what your needs and concerns are and where you want to take the project.
I have a specific CREATE question, I think, Bill, you might be able to answer. What was the cost of the 130th Street and Torrance Ave project?
$172 million. And you can always go to the CREATE website, createprogram.org, and there's a big drop down there for all the projects, and any that are completed have the cost estimate. So that was our biggest project to date when it was finished, and it was definitely the most expensive grade separation project I've ever been involved in. But keep in mind, it had basically the roadway, and then on top of that is a railroad, and on top of that's another railroad. So it's basically like a big sandwich, basically the way it's structured, and very, very significant project.
It looks like there are about 3 more, if that's good with everyone. Let's see. If our region is looking at the restoration of an Amtrak route, and then specifically North Coast, Hiawatha, and Pioneer, what suggestions do you have to proactively advocate beyond working with Amtrak and the host railroad?
You mean I guess the question is if they're thinking it's going to happen in the future and they want to build a grade I'm reading this as they want to build a grade separation now in anticipation of that. If that's the question, that's going to be, I'll just tell you, that'll be a difficult sell, because FHW has told us many times they will not invest money where they don't know precisely when the benefits are going to occur. In other words, if you have the route established and basically everybody's agreed that starting in 2026, this route's going to open up, and so now you need to create a grade separation, that'll allow it to move forward. But if this is just in the planning stages and that route doesn't exist, I know that USDOT generally will not invest if they can't see the end of the project completed that you're basically trying to assist.
Okay, 2 more. For the Crossing Elimination Program, should the railroad be the leader starting it, or the city or state?
The railroads will not drive the train or the bus. They'll help you. They will definitely help you, and they will have knowledgeable, good engineers to help you, depending on how stretched those people are. and they have government affairs people that very well understand the state agencies and can help make contacts with the state, the city, and the county. But the railroads cannot take the lead on a grade separation project. In Chicago, all of that leadership is either by the, depending upon the location of it, it's by the city of Chicago, the state of Illinois, or Cook County. Now, if it's outside of Cook County, and we do have some projects like that, it may be the IDOT may take, the Department of Transportation will take the leadership role. Sometimes at the very beginning in the phase one, the local city or community or village may actually take a leadership role, and then they basically will transfer it over to say IDOT to manage maybe the main construction. They say, hey, we don't have the depth, we can't afford to basically bring on a firm to help us manage this project, and the state will oftentimes, they'll put a lot of money into it anyway, but they'll basically help them manage the grade separation construction.
Great. And then the final one I'm seeing, what percentage of applications are typically funded for different DOT grants? I don't know if
I don't know the answer to that. Melissa, do you know?
I'm trying to think. I think with Christie this year, it was what, like 30% or so. I think that's right. But I think it varies, you know, based on how many applications they get and how much funding they have. This is definitely a big program. I mean, it's about $600 million. But, you know, I think it'll just depend on, obviously this is a new program, so we don't have any historical data to say how many projects get funded, but it will just depend on how many people apply for it. And we're hoping it's a good, robust program and that we have a really good, robust application process this year.
Great.
Well, as my father always said, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. If you don't ask,
So
you know, it's like, well, you're worried about not getting the money. It's like you need to ask first.
On that note, I think that's it. And if there are any remaining questions or you think of any later, like Melissa said earlier, you know, let us know, or and we'll do our best to answer them.
Absolutely. And thank you both very much. Melissa, thank you. Bill, thank you. Betsy, thank you for putting this together. And many thanks to everybody who signed on. And again, that was a lot of information. The webinar will be available on our website if you want to go back and review it. Also, as Betsy said, please feel free to reach out to us directly with any questions you have, and we'll do our very best to help. All good?
Yep. Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.